Hi guys, welcome back to another video. Today I'm back outside and back with a video, not just a audio review. Today's such a beautiful day. It's, as you can tell, it's a bit breezy, so hopefully the microphone won't be too annoying. But today I just finished up another one of the dialogues from the Last Days of Socrates, and this time it was his apology. The Apology is a masterpiece. It's one of the most beautiful pieces of literature that I've ever read, one of the most moving, one of the most inspiring. And first, let me begin by saying, well, it's much shorter than the Phaedo that I read, that I reviewed the other day. It's, I'm just guessing it's about 30 pages maybe, and as opposed to the 80 pages or 80 pages of the Phaedo. So it's one of the shorter dialogues, and you know what? In fact, it's not really a dialogue at all. It's it's really kind of a monologue. So first, it'd be important first to make a comment about the title Apology. Now, I think I said last time, or at least I put a text on the video last time, that none of these dialogues were named by Plato. Um, they were named by usually Latin or Roman readers. Most of the most of the names are the names given to them by probably like people like Cicero and all his Christian readers over the Middle Ages and into modernity. Um, Now, the apology, the first thing to note about the title, apology, apologia in Greek, I believe it's a Greek word, not just a Latin word. I think it's both. Could be wrong. Um, Apology doesn't mean apology means I admit a wrongdoing in this case. Apologia means defense. So it's important to note how words change over time. And words change is interesting because I was thinking about that. What word would we use today for, or what word would the ancient people use for an apology? And I was thinking, I can't think of it right off, but I was thinking more like the words um, mercy and pity, and all their cognates are probably like, it's interesting how the words juxtapose. So today, apology means what mercy and pity meant then, and mercy and pity mean now what uh, what apology meant then for us, if that makes sense. So anyway, Plato's apology or Socrates' apology is not him saying sorry. It's him defending himself. It's him explaining himself. So Socrates was put on trial, and scholars have never quite understood why, and they try to make sense out of it. The fact is, yeah, Socrates was annoying, like anybody who, like any wiseacre is annoying, but why would annoyance lead to death? Very rarely does being annoying lead to death. It would in a situation like Stalin's Russia, of course, but even like absolutist kings like the Louis in France, they they rarely executed someone for being annoying. Um, Voltaire was imprisoned for being annoying, but he wasn't imprisoned or executed, and he wasn't executed for being annoying. He was just the way it was back then. Basically, any powerful person could imprison another person. That's in the France of the King's Louis. Anyway, so it's a bit of a mystery to us why Socrates was put on trial. It was a bit of a chaotic time in Athens at the time, and this comes across in the dialogue itself, um, where Socrates says, under the democracy, this happened, and then there was the rule of the 30 tyrants or whatever, and now there's the rule of the 500 or 400 or something. So things were kept moving along, and uh, in Athens, in the Greek city-states, very often there was political turmoil after a battle was lost. Okay, so that was a time, like, say, if, Athens went to war with Sparta or something and things went badly, then the government would sort of fall from power. It's not all that different from things today, like, um, if Putin's war goes very badly, then Putin will probably lose power and someone else will take his place. Um, and in the United States, if wars go badly, that president's not going to be reelected. So the thing that comes across through Socrates names the people that put him up on trial, and he talks about three people specifically. And the end, obviously, Socrates was sentenced to death, but it was by a small majority of votes. And Socrates says that if uh, if the guy who accused him hadn't corralled a few of his powerful friends into getting all their supporters, then Socrates wouldn't have been executed. So he lost by, I don't know, 30 votes or something like that. So by a small majority was he sentenced to death. And it was stated, and it will be stated in a subsequent dialogue in the next dialogue, which is the Crito, I believe, that and also the Phaedo, that Socrates had a real easy opportunity to escape. So just bribe a few judges, or I should say guards, bribe a few guards, and he'd be able to escape. But the point was, Socrates was standing on principle, as he always did, and he said, like, for him to disobey um, the legitimate authority of his city state would be wrong. And even if it was a judgment against him, that'd be wrong. But he's not naive in saying that everything that a state decides is good. He was appreciative to the people that voted against his execution, and to the people that voted for his execution, he kind of issued some dire warnings and said, basically, things are going to go poorly for you. Socrates, at least in Plato's telling, Socrates clearly believed he was following the will of God, um, and God and gods are interchangeable in Plato's language, um, and that if he was following God's will, then clearly, uh, the people who voted for his execution were not following God's will. So it's a bit of a sticky predicament in a way, or at least a sticky metaphysics when you think about it, in that, um, if the world is good and orderly and run by the gods, then how can bad things happen? But it's so funny how even when things were moving against him, he makes a very startling statement. Let me just see where it is. I know I highlighted it, or I know I emphasized it, or whatever. Where did it go now? Okay, he says, probably just a little more than halfway through the dialogue, he says that neither Meletus nor Anytus can do me any harm at all. They would not have the power, because I do not believe that the law of God permits a better man to be harmed by a worse. Okay, so it's a really interesting statement in that way, that even though it seems like a better man is being harmed by a worse, that's not really the case. So, and that's part of the mystery of life. And so, I think one of the things that came across me in this rereading of the Apology was how much Plato's Socrates was driven by a religious principle. He mentions God repeatedly in this dialogue, and I guess to me that's a bit of a surprise, because um, although everybody knows that Socrates believed he was following the voice of God in some way or another. Um, how much of that was just his shorthand for saying my conscience, or his shorthand for saying um, the principle of synderesis, you know, do good, shun evil. How much of it was that, in that abstract sense of following God, and how much of it was a direct or indirect through an oracle, because he always said he was following the oracle at Delphi, who told him, or who stated through one of his friends, that Socrates was the wisest of all men. And Socrates said he lived his life to prove that the oracle was wrong, kind of, or to prove that that wasn't literally so. Okay, so, and then Socrates had to admit in the end that all the people he was talking to were more confused than he was. So in the end, he's like, okay, I'm the wisest because I know that I don't know stuff. All these people that I talk to, they think they know stuff, and I keep proving them wrong. So I guess I am the wisest because I know that I don't know, whereas they don't know that they don't know. Okay, that makes you wiser. So I guess I was surprised that, in this sense, Socrates is less a philosopher than he is a religious person, if that makes any sense at all. Now, Socrates would say that he wouldn't understand that distinction. Wisdom is wisdom, and I always think it's important to. I always keep thinking back to one of the important Neoplatonists' works, one of the disciples of Plotinus, Porphyry. Porphyry wrote a work called Philosophy from Oracles. Um, I've never read that work, but just the title alone sort of suggests something. Philosophy from Oracles. It makes me think of the project of, Anselm or Thomas Aquinas and the Scholastics, that they're constructing philosophy from revelation. That's what theology is. It is um, it is rational reflection on revelation as opposed to reason itself. So yeah, nobody would really be comfortable with the distinction between religion and philosophy in the ancient world. Absolutely. Like people like Augustine and other Roman writers realized there was a difference between what philosophers were up to and what, say, Hesiod and Homer were up to, and what the followers of the various religious cults were up to. The followers of Bacchus or the followers of Diane or Athena or whomever. They knew that there was a difference, and they called one civic religion and the other whatever philosophy, I guess, and one was the religion of the poets. Okay, so these three main distinctions. So I guess in a way that I'm a bit surprised to be reminded of how religious Socrates was. Okay, um, now that so there's a difference without a distinction without a difference, or difference without a distinction. That's not the case here, because the most serious charge that Socrates is answering to in the Apology is that he's attacking the gods. Okay, so at one point it's said he's an atheist. At another point, it's saying he teaches against the the city's gods. Okay, so every city was basically based around various cults. Um, every city usually had its favorite god or whatever, and this was the case for all civilization. So if you think back to Babylon, Akkadian, Sumer, they all had their favorite city god or gods. Obviously, Athens was Athena to some extent. Artemis was its city was Diana. Its god was Diana. Its famous temple. Uh, Rome was specially dedicated to Juno and Jupiter. I guess that's so, um, and so on and so on. So there was, I mean, generally, if you think back to the Old Testament and um, the Persian king Cyrus the Great's relationship with Israel was a positive one because Cyrus wanted to make all the gods happy, even the God of Israel, because if he made all the gods happy, then he'd be more powerful. So the ancient world didn't basically say that belief in one God but meant disbelief in another God, but there was some favoritism and preferences and so on. Really, the Jews were the only ones who said that no, there's no other gods but the God of Israel, and that wasn't always the case. If you look back to the earliest of the Old Testament writings, um, there's a recognition of the real um, proximity, I guess, of the God of Israel. He's got God of heaven or whatever, and other gods are spoken of quite frequently. So obviously the Israelites themselves had a real problem with trying to just do what they're supposed to do and only cultivate worship of Yahweh or Jehovah or Elohim. Um, but what distinguished Israel or Judaism from all the other religions was, in a way, it's monotheism, and that's where we get the phrases from the Old Testament, where it says all the other gods are demons or whatever, right? Um, that wasn't the belief of Greece and Rome and so on. So the most that Socrates' accusers can say is that he's teaching against basically the traditional understanding of the gods. And he most certainly was, let's be honest. But it was easy enough for philosophers like Socrates and then Plato, definitely Plato, in his Republic. Plato's very famously in the Republic says, what the poets say about the gods is garbage. They make the gods look horrible. And sorry, I got distracted there for a second. So the his accusers have to make more specific accusations because Socrates is defending himself both against the charge of atheism and the charge against um, contradicting the city's understanding of the gods. Okay, and frankly, he was right. For as much as we understand anything about Socrates, Plato indicates that yeah, his understanding of the gods was very different from the common person's understanding of the gods. But that isn't that beside the point. That's not really sufficient to get you executed in Athens. So there's a lot more going on. Let's never forget that Socrates does talk about the fact that he didn't really get himself involved in politics. He talked about the safer life was a quiet life. Um, but he said a few times he was forced to be in politics, and those few times that he was on a council or whatever, he tried to do the right thing, and basically that made him enemies. Okay, so not only did Socrates make enemies during his political career, but he was friends with other people's enemies. Okay, Socrates was friends with powerful people in Athens who are enemies of other powerful people. So I think Socrates' death was a way to even the score between these powerful people. That's sort of my understanding. But in the end, just to be quick about this before I hit the 20-minute mark, in the end, this is one of the most beautiful, inspiring pieces of literature to encourage a life spent in pursuit of knowledge and wisdom. It certainly has made a lasting impact upon me, and I'm sure it has impacted many. But in the end, Socrates is correct that the life in pursuit of wisdom is a life of poverty, and, and that's certainly the case. So, anyone who's going to truly follow wisdom is going to incur a lot of misunderstanding and resentment. Anyway, on a day like this, it's hard to feel bad about anything. It's such a beautiful day. So, thanks, guys, for listening. Have a great day.